Fantasy worlds are often filled with creatures with unusual names, but when it comes to the world of Narnia, there's something special, unique about the names of these incredible characters that we've come to know and love. They just seem to resonate on a deeper level. Names like Tumnus, Reepicheep, Puddleglum, Jadis, Rapidash, Lucy, Aslan, and many more. Now, if there's one thing I've learned throughout my years of studying the world of Narnia, it's that the world is filled with hidden secrets, often placed just beneath the surface, just waiting to be discovered. In fact, I've come to presume that not one word or plot line was written haphazardly. Instead, each line of text is saturated with deeper meaning. And when it comes to names in Narnia, I've discovered that there's really so much more waiting to be discovered. So today, we're going to talk about the incredible and sometimes surprising meanings behind the names of Narnia. Now, before we go any farther, I want to take a minute and talk to you about something that's really important to me. And you don't want to skip ahead because in just a few minutes, I'll be telling you how you can get some free Into the Wardrobe swag. You know, one of the reasons that C.S. Lewis wrote the Narnian books was to prepare young people to boldly face the world that awaited them, equipped to stand strong with the truth, virtue, and faith. In this uncertain world that we live in today, young people need preparation more than ever. That's why I am so excited to announce that Into the Wardrobe is partnering with Boyce College, a college that I've loved and believed in for many, many years. Boyce College in Louisville, Kentucky prepares graduates for the what and the who they will be after college. One way Boyce College accomplishes this is by emphasizing faith first. A biblically faithful understanding of the Bible and a life-centering relationship with Jesus Christ are foundational to everything Boyce College does and all that they teach. Now, you and your student can experience faith first firsthand during Boyce College's preview days. Register at boycecollege.com/Narnia and use the promo code Narnia to waive the $25 student registration fee. Now, not only that, but if you attend this experience, I'll send you a free Into the Wardrobe mug with original Into the Wardrobe artwork. And if you're coming, please let me know. I'd love to meet you personally and tell you why I think Boyce College is in an absolutely amazing place to prepare for the world ahead. Well, I hope you can make it, but in the meantime, let's talk names. It's time to leave the Shadowlands behind and step into a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. I think the first time I started to wonder about the meaning of names in Narnia was years ago when I learned, as most of you probably know, that the name Aslan was actually Turkish for lion. Now, this always made me wonder how his name was written in Turkish translations of the book. It turns out he's still named Aslan with a capital A, which is a perfectly fine way of doing things according to Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. Now, Lewis later writes to a fan that he came across the name while researching the book 1001 Arabian Nights, but the Turkish language seems to have influenced a lot of naming in Narnia. There's Tash, the demon of Calormen, which is Turkish for stone, hinting at the idea that he was a false god whose idols were made of stone. Miraz is Turkish for inheritance, which of course is the one thing he was so obsessed with stealing from his brother Caspian IX that he murdered him for it. The Calormen prince Rapidash Tarkin, whose family it was claimed descended directly from Tash himself, his first name is Turkish for God namesake. And then the last name Tarkin is a commonly understood Central Asian term for nobleman. And then, of course, there's Jadis, the White Witch of Narnia, whose ancient history spans across thousands of years, even into the ancient universe of Charn. Well, there are times when names seem to have double meanings and multiple origins in Narnia. And in this case, Jadis is, fittingly enough, the word for witch. However, her long and sordid history is hinted at by the French translation of her name, which means long ago or once upon a time. Now, it also seems to be a common theme in Narnia to name characters according to their noticeable traits. That doesn't take a genius to recognize with characters like Farsight the Eagle, Trufflehunter the Badger, or Ginger the ginger-colored cat. And of course, there's poor old Bulguy Bear. How'd you like to carry a name like that your whole life? Many of these descriptive names also are portmanteaus or combinations of two words, such as the giant Rumblebuffin, with rumble describing the ground-shaking size and buffin meaning a French term for a rough or uncouth man. Then there was Roonwit the Centaur, a trusted advisor to King Tyrion and a skilled astrologist, whose name means wisdom from runes. Then there's Restamar, one of the lost Narnian lords who was discovered far across the Eastern Ocean. His name means rest at sea. And of course, we can't forget everyone's favorite wet blanket, Puddleglum, who lived his life in a soggy marsh and had an equally gloomy personality. And finally, there's the tiny, brave hero, Reepicheep, whose squeak was as fearsome as his skill with his rapier. Now, there are other names in Narnia that are more descriptive of the personalities of the character. For example, Shift the Ape was, well, a shifty ape, and his companion, Puzzle the Donkey, seemed to be perpetually confused. Or Glazel, the Telmarine general who loudly claimed loyalty to Miraz but secretly conspired in his murder, his name is a Middle English word meaning to flatter. And then there's Rishta Tarkin, the Calormene who manipulated himself into the highest position of influence over the followers of Tashlin. His name means charmer. Now, interestingly enough, he also attempted to charm Tash in the mystical sense by conjuring the demon and calling him to Narnia, which would ultimately lead to Rishta's terrifying destruction. Now, speaking of names, I want to take a minute and show you all of these names. The names of the amazing Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. They're an amazing group of folks, and their support is what keeps this channel going. So thanks, everyone. Now, there's one more category of names that I want to tell you about, and I believe it's the most important. You see, during my research, I noticed that for many of the most important, most poignant characters, their names didn't really reflect any obvious traits or characteristics. Instead, they pointed to something deeper and far more important, rooted in their very destiny. Take, for example, Cornelius, the first person to call for the restoration of Narnia under the Telmarine conquest. A person whose name means horn, not only because he preserved Susan's ancient and magical horn, but also because the word is associated with the call to battle and the sound of victory. Then there's Emeth, the Calormene who devoted his life in service to his god and who ultimately learned that his service to the false god Tash was actually service to the true god Aslan. In Hebrew, Emeth means faithful and true. Or who could forget Tumnus, whose appearance marks the beginning of the end of the eternal winter, a story that starts in Lantern Waste and ends in victory beneath the hill of the Stone Table. Now, I talk more about the subject of the Stone Table in this video, and I dive more into the life of Tumnus in this episode. But Tumnus' name is probably short for Vertumnus, the Roman god of change and seasons. And even more interestingly, the sound of Tumnus' name in Latin, Vertumnus, could be understood to mean spring hill. And then let's look at the twin brothers Cor and Corin, who may have names that sound the same, but their destinies were very different. The name Corin is a derivative of the Roman god Quirinius, the god of war, which is pretty appropriate for a boy who became a legendary fighter later in life. And Cor? Well, if you know much about this brave and pure slave turned king, you'll understand why his name is the Latin word for heart. Now, of course, we all know and love Diggory Kirke, a young boy who was utterly lost in despair in The Magician's Nephew when his story began, and who would eventually become lost in the very multiverse itself. And so, is it any wonder that this name means lost one? But the story doesn't just end there, because the very act of becoming lost is what ultimately brought Diggory home and back to a place of security. And get this, his last name, Kirke, it comes from the same place we get the word circle, a reference to Circe, a Greek goddess with a mastery of magic, and it means secured with rings. And Diggory's companion, Polly Plummer, well, believe it or not, her name is a derivative of the Hebrew name Miriam, from Miriam to Mary to Molly to Polly. And just like her lost companion, the name Miriam can also be translated as the lost child. And so these two companions were truly destined to become lost and then found together. Now, what about Narnia's best-known family, the Pevensies? Well, you may know that Peter means rock, which is the perfect name for the dependable, firm-footed High King. But he's also the namesake of Saint Peter, who was given the keys to the kingdom when his master departed, delegated with the highest authority to oversee his kingdom. And then there's Edmund, whose name means protection, who would eventually not only become a protector of Narnia, but even of other nations, such as when he fought to protect Archenland from the Calorman army at the Battle of Anvard. And Susan's name means lily, a flower which is not only a nod to her profound beauty, but it also represents purity, rebirth, new beginnings, and hope, which I believe was intended to point to her untold story beyond the pages of Narnian history. And finally, there's Lucy, the namesake of Lucy Barfield, C.S. Lewis's goddaughter, whom Narnia was written for in the first place. But Lucy's name also carries even deeper meaning. This girl, who entered Narnia under the flame of a single lamppost, whose arrival in Narnia served as a beacon of hope, and that the Golden Age prophecy would be fulfilled and darkness would be defeated, and whose joy constantly shone brightly in all circumstances. Is it any wonder then that the name Lucy means light? Well, all of this just goes to show you that in the best written stories, the ones written by a masterful world builder, names really matter. And that goes for your story too, because no matter what your story has been, the creator of our world knows your story even better than you do. And only he has the power to rewrite what your story could be, to even give you a new name, because he himself was given a new name. And it's a name that's above every other name. And that's the true power of a name. Do you know the 3 most asked questions from parents who are searching for the right fit college for their student? Find the questions and the answers at boyscollege.com/faith.